Right, so I want to talk about a system that we've been building during the course of project over the last couple of 3 years. And in order to do that, I want to paint a bit of the context for the project because it's important that you know where we're coming from, because I think we're from a slightly different community than many people here. So first of all, this is a project that's funded, as many of the projects were, under the RCUK's Energy Communities program. It's a 3-year project, and it's taking a practice-based orientation in which we hope to design and deploy a custom-built device within existing energy communities within the UK, including several that were funded through the DEC's Low Carbon Community Challenge. When I say we want to design a device, it is of a very particular nature that I will now try to explain. So I come from a place called the Interaction Research Studio, which is in the design department of Goldsmiths. We've been working for a number of years together, and we are a team of about a dozen designers, technologists, and social scientists who do practice-based research, that is research through design. The core of our work is to develop kind of speculative new computational devices that are often for the home. They're often kind of take the form of products that involve computation, and they very rarely are addressing particular problems or providing clear functionality. They're not particularly utilitarian. Instead, we try to design devices that are more curious. They open up possibilities for new experiences and provide resources for orienting to the worlds in various ways. So that's where we're coming from. For this project, we've joined with a colleague of ours, Mike Michaels, who was originally PI of the project, but unfortunately moved to Australia. And he comes from a background in science and technology studies, where he's been interested in the way that people and artifacts join together to create assemblages that can orient towards the world and also engage in practices that are sort of shaped by and shape the technologies. So we started talking. We've both shared a mutual interest in the possibility of working environmental issues, but from a particular position. So we kind of talked about a trajectory for the project that started with us engaging with existing energy communities, which I'll describe very briefly later, doing research to understand how those communities work, then using that to design a product in our studios that we could then distribute back to those communities. And of key interest to us is the way that would help to reshape those communities, that the devices we made would start acting within those communities potentially to help them understand their practice different, to allow them to engage in new practices, to join together, and to involve new people as well. So that's the kind of overall trajectory of the project that we set out to engage on. So in terms of our methods or our practice, we have gone through a few years of engaging with local energy communities in a variety of ways. We started, and in fact continue, by trying to understand the rather complex literature on energy demand reduction, the government policies, the various commitments of practitioners, and so forth. And that's an ongoing process for us. We also recruited and spent a fair amount of time visiting a fairly wide number and variety of existing communities involved in energy practice, ranging from people from the Bristol Energy Network up to the REPIM Green Team up in Norfolk and so forth, all of whom are engaged in kind of local community efforts to deal with environmental issues, whether by generating new energy or trying to use less energy and so forth. We also pulled members of those communities to a workshop that we held in London with a number of representatives of those communities, as well as outside academics and people from the government, in which we tried to understand the communities, but also help them understand each other and form new relationships through a variety of tasks. So, for instance, we asked them to go through a collaborative mapping task in which they designed their own communities that merged elements of their existing communities and also exposed various issues and orientations that they were interested in. We gave them blank newspaper and magazine covers and asked them to fill them in as a way of getting at their kind of hopes and fears for the future. And we gave them mapping projects in which we asked them to map various activities to get at a kind of effective experience surrounding various kinds of activities that they might undertake in their day-to-day lives. So that became a point of contact for all the communities with us and with each other. Later, we designed and distributed a cultural probes study to the people in the communities. Cultural probes are a method we've used various times over the years in which we give evocative, kind of playful tasks to people and ask them to respond to those tasks, and the results provide them a way of telling us about themselves, often in unexpected and quite insightful ways. So this one was designed specifically to deal with issues having to do with energy, and included things like a confession letter in which we asked them to tell us an energy usage secret, or a A2 poster that they could hang up and record their energy rules that they thought were relevant, a survival kit for the future, and an obituary for an electrical appliance. All of which actually gave us really interesting insights into their orientations towards energy and the use of energy and the practices surrounding it. And there was more besides. So all of this provided the workshops, the visits, provide us with a massive kind of textured information or experience with the communities we're designing for. So we started to turn towards the design work itself. And the way we undertake that is typically by trying to create a design space of possible ideas for design, which we spend a significant amount of time on. And in this case, it took the form of a design workbook containing some 50 to 100 brief design proposals, plus various treatments of issues that we might want to look at and so forth. When I say brief, I mean that most proposals cover a page or two. They typically are made up of an image or a diagram, perhaps just addressing a context or proposing a system, and a short descriptive text and a bit of a quote. They're often quite playful. They're not meant to be taken very literally. They're pointers for directions for design. So, for instance, this one is a diagram of a proposal in which we thought that a gas meter box might contain a radio that would be constantly broadcasting kind of propaganda from a transition activist. Or this one, even slightly odder, is a kind of run of proposals trying to create a metaphor in which birds would fly in and out of the various communities, bringing odd bits of information about energy usage, perhaps in other far-off communities. And all of these set us in, and actually, oddly enough, both these proposals can be seen quite strongly in what we actually ended up building. A lot of this work culminated with the diagram of a system shown here, in which kind of maps out energy being collected from the web on top and from inputs in people's homes or public spaces in the communities, brought into a central server to be processed and curated in various ways, and then sent out to displays back in the communities. And that diagram became a kind of agreed point of departure for our design work, in which we started to focus our designs, and in fact ended up producing a design brief where we talked about displaying material collected from individual community and public sources to open and promote constructive affect and involvement in energy reduction issues. And that then became really what we started to work up. So the system itself, the system itself takes in information from a couple of basic sources. One is local contributions within the communities in which people are allowed and encouraged to speak into microphones and leave voice messages, to use SMS to type text messages to the system, and to phone into a voicemail, an energy line voicemail. And we also want to collect energy production data from the local communities produced by the turbines and PVCs and so forth. And we mix that with information that we scrape from the web using bots that crawl, particularly Twitter, looking for energy-related tweets from NGOs, governments, utilities, also news items and so forth, and also pick up information about national grid updates and sources of energy. And these are all mixed together and then processed by a variety of algorithms. And crucially for this, one of the decisions we made, for better or worse, was that all of the outputs from the system would be converted to audio. So all the system outputs are played using synthesized voices So the Twitter, for instance, you don't read it, you hear it. And this gives a kind of uniformity to the outputs and also allows the device to inhabit the space in a particular kind of way. So this shows the full kind of architecture of the system that we ended up building, which I will not go into in detail, but again, the sources are on the left of the kind of SMS, Twitter, and energy sources, a variety of algorithms to group and time and juxtapose the things that we receive and then played out to the devices on the right. Meanwhile, a fair amount of our time was spent actually designing the product itself, because we consider this a key part towards the presentation of the system. These are some of the models that we made in the process. To cut a very long story short, we started to focus on the ways that audio devices indicate their functionality through a variety of speakers and cones and so forth, and also started looking at objects that gather and deliver contents in various ways, because the notion was that the device would bring in content, hold it, and allow it out again. And this is the more or less final design of the device. So it's a device where the electronics are housed in the base, and there's a speaker and the kind of raised portion going to a glass megaphone to play the sound, and there's a microphone that sits and sort of visibly enters sound into the system, set on the side of the system. And importantly, there's a volume control. So I'm going to play you now a short video of the system, which will give you a much better idea of what it's like, and then I can go on and talk a bit more about what we plan to do with it and why we've done it.
This is an energy demand report. The demand remains steady. Coal energy has gone up by 1%. Coal currently contributes 41% of demand. Combined cycle gas energy has gone down by 5%. Combined cycle gas currently contributes 26% of demand. Wind-powered energy has gone up by 14%. Wind currently contributes 9% of demand.
Domestic activities are energy-consuming, being aligned as energy police. Energy police, they do the hoovering.
Escalating energy demand will boost Asia's pressure transmitter market.
Recent message teach us that nothing is ever lost.
In the last hour, the following have been switched off: 9 lights, 6 engines, 6 TVs, 2 fans, 2 electors.
Right. So that's more or less the snapshot of the system. It's playing much more information than it usually does. It's a bit more, we've kind of varied the rate at which stuff comes out of the system, so it has ebbs and flows. It's not constantly going. And you can hear some of the kinds of messages that we're playing from that. So that's the basic system. What we're doing now, what we've been in the process for a while, is batch producing, and we plan to batch deploy the system. So we're making 30. We're in the business of fabricating 30 of these devices, which is a fairly massive undertaking. We've outsourced injection molding of the basic housing plus some of the other parts, and we are assembling them kind of as we speak within the studio, so that we'll have a number of these devices. The plan is to deploy them fairly widely, so we really hope to concentrate on some more or less 5 of the energy communities that we've formed relationships with, so that each of them would have multiple devices, and there could be a number of people within the communities being able to discuss and complain about and share information about the devices locally, but also because they can enter information into the device, they'll be able to use that to trade information and to hear what other people in other communities are saying. We haven't done this yet. We hope to be deploying these in the next couple of months, and the plan is to use some combination of self-reports from the people combined with ethnographies of their use in probably fairly short visits to the communities, documentary film, and kind of online data tracking of what the actual messages being left and heard are. And we'll see what happens. So since I can't tell you what's happened, I'll tell you what I think might happen, what I think the point of the device is, and why I find this an intriguing thing to try. So to begin with, as I said, there's one way of looking at the Babble as a kind of odd form of newscast, and and intercom. So it's a device for networking together the communities. They can speak into them and hear, and also they can receive new information from the outside about energy-related matters. And in this sense, we hope that it might help to support the community and allow a kind of community to form amongst the communities. At the same time, it's also a disruptive device. So there's elements which are really quite strange. For instance, one of the things we do is use a Markov algorithm that takes in various of the feeds that it's received and combines them together to make sort of semi-legible strings of words that may provide new ways of looking at matters or may just simply be slightly nonsensical. And equally, we expect that there to be a fair amount of irrelevant or absurd input, both because of the way the bots work on the net, but also because we're leaving a device with a microphone potentially in public places. And we expect it to be misused in various ways. And we do this, and it also, as you heard, all the things are presented using synthesizers' voices that make them seem slightly strange. They're treated in a way that brings them onto a level playing field. And all of this makes it a device that's a bit odd, a bit strange. And we do this on purpose, and I want to try to explain why. So there's a couple of key perspectives that I think are useful here. One is the notion of the idiot, which is a conceptual figure that the philosopher Stingers has talked about, who is basically a character who resists the consensual way in which situations are presented and demands that we slow down, that we don't consider ourselves authorized to believe we possess the meaning of what we know. And I think this notion that the babble is a form of idiot is actually a telling one. The babble is trying to take the way that people describe the practices and the discourses around energy that exist in these communities and disrupt it and sort of ask people to slow down and rethink it and start again in a way. One way to understand that is through Bruno Latour's discussion of various forms of politics as played out as issues emerge with new technologies, for instance, technologies of measuring climate change or CO2 in the atmosphere. This brings up new issues. Those issues become increasingly emerge into larger and larger publics until they get dealt with by government and become part of an infrastructure. And there's a kind of progressive hardening of issues as this process continues. And one of the things that we kind of feel in addressing what we feel we see strongly in the community here is the way that government policies and local commercial activities and individual efforts and efforts of smaller communities all are playing with issues of energy in ways that lead to understandings sometimes becoming quite hardened. One way to look at the babble is that we're trying to retrace some of the steps of the emergence of issues, that we're trying to take things back a bit and allow them to emerge again in new ways. So in other words, it's a tool for rethinking some of these issues. So that means that there's various things that we might expect to see with this device that we hope we might see. So as a kind of extended intercom, we might find that communities are sharing reports of their practice and so forth. That allows them to come into new sorts of agreements with each other and allows this kind of community to form. But equally, we may see disagreements about what's important or what the right way to proceed are. And we may find that it prompts some sort of rethinking on the parts of the communities about how to think about and how to practice with issues of energy. And all of this we think would be really quite fruitful and lovely. Equally, I think that we may well see, although we don't want to, an annoyance with the device of various sorts, and also even a criticism of our project as it fits within this funded research within issues of energy. And this too, I think, would be productive, although perhaps not really welcome, it would be productive in promoting discussions and rethinking about this kind of agenda. So that's basically an overview of the project. There's just a few basic points. We're addressing energy communities, and their understandings and practice is not really trying to build devices that would promote reduction of consumption itself. We think the project is interested in using an embodied device, a bespoke device, as an agent into the communities to promote some sort of change and inquiry within them. And again, we're trying to balance support for practices with, crucially, a kind of disruption and questioning of existing orientations. So that's us. Thank you.